everybody, you have to talk about education being, producing individuals with holistic wellness. It deals with physical, mental, and spiritual wellness. Today, character building is very important. You need to deconstruct what happened in Delhi, what happened in Jantar Mantar. Look at these aspects. So these ideas are there in our indigenous knowledge, in our local knowledge, starting with Mahatma Gandhi, Vivekananda, Radha Krishna ji, APJ Abdul Kalam, and other spiritual leaders. So we have this knowledge with us. And why is not an effort being made to transact this to the next generation? The civilization has to move on. And therefore, let me ask the second question. Why is IKS needed in education? Because though we have a good policy, the new NEP 2020, but for some reason, to try to come from the domain of education, the present education system is limited. We are in a rat race. We are looking at making career, earning livelihood, and acquisition of working skills. Look at our Prime Minister. He talks about skill development. See, there is one component, the knowledge. The other aspect is skill. If you look at the city from which I come, from Silicon, what we call as the Silicon City, Bangalore. Look at any of the cosmopolitan cities. Have you realized the suicide rates are increasing? Now, students are almost locked in their classrooms and the living rooms with constant pressure and fear from parents, teachers, friends and society. They just cannot function. And that is where Dr. Radhakrishnan's words are noticeable when he states that the present generation must understand the meaning of life. Now this meaning of life is our contribution to the whole world. And in that context, spirituality is a process of personal transformation that could deepen within each one of us. It is your way of living, loving, accepting, and relating to the world and people around you with an open heart and mind. And therefore, the paradox of our time is that we have multiplied our possessions but reduced our values. In a conference in the year 2026, we are still talking about values. And I have vast experience traveling across the different parts of the world. The way we look at values, the way we look at how we can promote the society, how we can upbring our youngsters, I don't think this knowledge is available with anybody, any other country. And therefore we have to benefit from that. Why I am saying this is because we have learned how to make a living, but not a life. We have added years to life, not life to years. Now, there is a devastating picture of the modern education. I think today a very interesting point was made by Dr. Shanti Sri. He said, stupidity is original. How many of us have reflected on that? We never allow students to, we are in higher education, we talk about liberal education, the freedom of mind, allowing discourses and discussions, but we never allow individuals to express themselves. Now, if you don't encourage stupidity, how you can build creativity and originality? Now, this is what should happen in the classrooms. And we are becoming victims to digital compliance. And digitally we are sound. Maybe, with regard to home, transportation, and all aspects of life. The online classes online material, virtual classrooms. Now, we may think that it's a miracle that beyond our traditional teachers, the digitally smart teachers are. With the emergence of the ChatGPT, the artificial intelligence, I want to ask three important things which is missing in our classrooms. Are we allowing dialogues in the classrooms? Are we allowing arguments in the classrooms? Are we allowing logical reasoning in the classrooms? Now this is missing. And look at these three aspects. These were not only spoken of by the great Greeks, but our traditional classrooms had these things. So in terms of the people taking responsibility to transform the local knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, I think it's up to the faculty and the teachers who can allow a dialogue to happen, allow students to argue and raise questions, allow individuals to build structures and logical reasoning. So, what I want to make two or three important points. What happens to civilization when it forgets the ways in which it has known with regard to civilization? What it means is that not merely what it knew, but how it knew, who was permitted to know, how knowledge was transmitted, what counted as evidence, what constituted a good life, and what responsibilities accompanied knowledge. So, there I believe the one deeper question underlying the national integration of the national education policy and its renewed emphasis is on the Indian knowledge system, or what we fondly call as the IKS. And therefore, it is necessary to discuss the national education policy in terms of a multidisciplinary education, flexibility, where we talk about multiple entry and exit, when we look at the academic bank of credits, skill development, the mother tongue education, the holistic learning, and employability, are all these aspects which are manifested in the national policy have an underlying feature in the Indian knowledge system. So, what I'm suggesting to my ideas is that India needs to rethink not only what it teaches, what it recognizes as knowledge, and specifically the Indian knowledge system. I want to close with a few interesting points. Why is IKS important and why it is integrated in the national policy? First thing is that my key points. These are my takeaway points because I'm building this up into a full paper. The first idea is that IKS is rooted in the pride of India. So integration of India's rich knowledge systems, traditions, culture and heritage. That is the reason why it was included in the national policy. Second aspect is that from the national policy point of view, the aspects of IKS refers to the liberal, multidisciplinary and holistic education with Indian knowledge system embedded across disciplines rather than confined to a single subject. Third aspect is that preservation, promotion and dissemination of Indian knowledge system through teaching, research, documentation, translation and publication, moreover moving across disciplines and subjects. So maybe the next conference in BHU should not be with the political science department, it should be a university level. Even the IIT campus professors should be here, the legal experts should be there to go back and understand what is the grade that we have. The fourth point, strengthening Indian languages. Languages are our strength, including classical languages as vehicles for the transmission and advancement of knowledge. High quality research and innovation on Indian knowledge system. I saw the schedule, there's so many wonderful papers that have come up. Now, the challenge is that can we teach IKS as a subject? No. IKS across all the disciplines And all disciplines will have to consider that we have traditional knowledge, we have indigenous knowledge, and that knowledge has to make its way through the disciplinary approaches across all disciplines. And therefore, combining traditional wisdom and contemporary scientific inquiry in addressing societal challenges. Now, having said that, it's important to reflect upon what exactly is the Indian knowledge system. IKS therefore demands new understanding of the curriculum. We know that we have to produce experts. We know that we have to build theoretical knowledge. But look at what is the Indian knowledge fundamentals and how we take our civilization further. The teacher must move from a transmitter to epistemic mediator. Don't teach theories. You can always challenge me. But can you get teachers to be epistemic mediators? And that reflection should not be only on the modernity aspect, but it has to have fundamentals of the Indian knowledge system. Most importantly, the Indian concept of knowledge is ethical. Go back to our ancestors, how they transmitted knowledge. Even a simple concept like Bhiksha, going through that experience, they talked about experience, modern educationists talk about experience, but they taught the experiential learning through experience. Finally, I have a model. In this model, a possible implementation strategy is this. First, is that you need to have a route, not route, not R-O-U-T-E. I am saying route. And that route is nothing but the Indian knowledge system. And that route is nothing but route learning in the Indian and local context. There was just a presentation from a legal expert. Then there was a, so beautifully, Dr. Saxena brought out the federalism concept. The Panchayati Raj system. Which other country you can talk about Panchayati Raj system? How beautifully the villages are managed. The local economy is managed. And the presentation from the environment. We have our own sustainable practices. Now this has to be reoriented the way we look at curriculum and curriculum transaction. So that is what is the route I am talking about. Second aspect is, it is time that we have to recover. Recover what? Recover neglected intellectual, ecological, linguistic, artistic, technological, and all knowledge form systems. The third aspect is to develop questions. Subject them to evidence, critique, and scholarly inquiry. This is the time, this is the moment we have a new policy integrated with IKS. Inquiry has to begin. The fourth aspect is to connect them with contemporary disciplines and global knowledge. What we call the global knowledge, global with local. The fifth aspect of this model is to generate new knowledge, solutions for contemporary problems. Now, with the westernization taking over, including medicine, but still we need to see the degree of integration. Finally, the model is like this: root, recover, question, connect, and create. And that is the ultimate objective is not cultural pride, but it becomes our intellectual confidence. Thank you very much.
Extending our by Professor Lagia and Rebecca Six. In fact, they are challenging this whole idea. I don't know whether knowingly or unknowingly, or in fact I see that Professor Dholakia's idea that it is not Indian knowledge system, but Indian knowledge system is a very fundamental question we must raise in introductions. If we talk of Indian system as a whole, then we miss out the very essence of intelligence. Similarly, Professor Rekha Saxena is also talking about decentralization, diversity. That means that this is the essence of Indian knowledge system. It's just not, Vedic, it's just not a punishment. It is also very much indigenous, very much local, very much community oriented. How actually? So this is a challenge to really understand and integrate into a kind of holistic. Professor Dholakia has also suggested very interesting thing, like questioning the how Dindayal Upadhyay is proposing an alternate history. That's sort of this is also a kind of thing. And Professor Dholakia is again suggesting very clearly and categorically that Dindayal's knowledge system, Dindayal's ideas must be put in a modern context. We are not really talking about going backwards and medieval. We have to locate Dindayal in the modern context and see him beyond India. This is actually very, very important, as I think, and which resonates with Professor Rekha Saxena's idea about unity, federalism, center-state relations, the huge, kind of areas he has referred to. Professor Rajneesh Kumar Singh and also Dr. Dilip, they are talking of, one is that the things concerned about preservation of nature. And, this is not simply that we are talking about, intellectual property rights and how to really, because, this is a major problem. So, I have seen, he says that, it is different from political science stream. I see, law is very much part of, politics. Like, you can't really disintegrate politics from law. You can't understand. So all these battles taking place at the global stage today on the fight, not only between, the United States and China, but also between Odisha and Bengal on intellectual, on Rasmala, right? Who owns? So similarly, so if you look at the farmers, like he's talking about the preservation and so on, and Dr. Helene also raised very interesting, points on environmental conservation of contributors, trying to analyze each element. Well, these are very detailing kind of, understanding, and I think the audience must have been reached by these. And Professor Kennedy's observation, when he is an educationist and he's talking about, that education policy and how IKS integrated. Well, I am not very sure how far we have integrated Indian knowledge system. It is just hype, or it is rhetoric, or really, he's actually questioning all this, right? That it is there in the system, but really, so far, we are only talking, right? But there is no perhaps not yet any concrete, kind of achievement. Well, it's an excellent kind of panel, and it's a pleasure to chair the session. And now, before I end the session, I ask Professor P.P. Singh to come and to announce people acceptance.
I will
my school to felicitate Dr. Eleni. Okay, one more thing about this. Please come fast and support mode of.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we conclude this enlightening section, I extend my sincere gratitude to all our distinguished speakers and participants. I thank Professor Pellettarungo, University Lecturer and Assistant Professor at the Leiden University Institute for India's contribution and for graciously sharing this lecture and for his valuable